Up
Oh yeah.
next, she's a well-known industry expert, dedicated Mary Mama, and she's usually in Northern California. But you know what? Carmen Sacramento got a call, and she's down in the
Yes.
City of Angels. Here to break us off with a little bit of hump day love is Mandy Tingler.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being patient for us while we got here so late. It really was the weed in the road.
Bales of this. Tracy,
From the
bales of
sky.
weed. Bales.
You heard it here
Bales.
first.
Not Dales, but bales of weed.
Today, my headline reads, Cannabis industry no longer riding high. Job losses, supply imbalances, dwindling profits hit sector. Bum, bum, bum. Western states such as California and Oregon are overflowing with cannabis, a supply glut that is driving down prices and sparking pleas for federal permission to sell marijuana across state lines. Pot users in New Jersey are facing the inverse, with consumers confronting high prices as trade groups accuse the state of slow-walking licenses that could increase the number of cannabis operators supplying the legal market. A trade group said Colorado had its worst April sales period in 5 years, a month associated with big cannabis sales typically. The legal pot industry is experiencing growing pains from coast to coast after a decade of rapid growth fueled by legalization for nearly 24 states. Industry representatives point to general stressors in the economy, including inflation and soaring interest rates. Venture funding is down, and demand for marijuana eases after a pandemic-fueled surge among people trapped at home. There's definitely significant headwinds across the board, and part of that is oversupply in Western states, said Aaron Smith, co-founder and CEO of the National Cannabis Industry Association. The industry is really overregulated, overtaxed, we know that, and we're competing against an existing underground market that's been thriving for decades. Turbulence in the pot industry is sparking calls for government rules that would allow interstate commerce and improve access to banking services. In turn, there is pushback from advocates who say legal pot is a failed experiment and doesn't need a bailout from state capitals or Washington. I don't think people who are in violation of federal law deserve any kind of congressional relief that would be like saying we should give relief to those engaging in prostitution businesses in Las Vegas, said Luke Noriaftos, executive vice president at the Smart Approaches to Marijuana. Much of the angst around legalization centered on the potential harm from products with high levels of THC, the active ingredient in cannabis, or fears of an increase in drug-influenced driving and accidents. The marijuana sector supported 493 full-time equivalent jobs in just early 2023, but is now down 2% from a year ago, according to Vankst. Nearly after a decade of unbroken double-digit job growth, the cannabis industry collectively pressed pause on new hiring in 2022, the report said. On the East Coast, pot advocates say a small cabal of operators in New Jersey are keeping prices artificially high because they face little competition. The New Jersey Cannabis Trade Association released a late August memo that said more than 700 applications to operate cannabis businesses are, quote, still pending, leaving aspiring entrepreneurs unable to open their operations. Consequently, potential tax revenue that would greatly benefit the state is lost as it continues to flow through the illicit market, the association says. The New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission says individual businesses, including trade association members, set the prices that consumers face, and you need to work together. Out west, terrific growing conditions in Pacific states have led to marijuana surpluses that remain trapped within the state borders because of the federal ban on marijuana. States would like to send excess supply to legal programs in other states that have legalized pot. For now, they face dwindling prices and profits. Earlier this year, the Associated Press reported that in places like Oregon, it's an open secret that some licensed growers have funneled product out of the state and into the black market just to stay afloat. Industry players said that they hope the growing appetite for legalizing marijuana comes with a federal desire to let states shuffle their products around the country. When we're talking about reforms, interstate commerce is vitally needed, said Mr. Smith of the National Industry Group, just talking about prices being too high in New Jersey and the and the eastern states and too low on the western states. Clearly, there's a solution for that. One of the biggest complaints that any cannabis business has, particularly smaller and mid-sized businesses, is lack of access to capital. And this is almost entirely due to the fact that banks are discouraged from working with cannabis businesses because of outdated federal laws. Even if you're able to find a bank that's willing to work with you, oftentimes they charge exorbitant prices in order to provide those services much beyond what other businesses have to deal with. This is coming from Mr. Fox from Normal. Senators in both parties are championing a bill that would give cannabis industry access to banking without fear of penalties or high fees. You guys know what the Safe Banking Act talks about. And the marijuana industry group pointed to a red tape and the lack of cooperation from banks as a driver of the cannabis job losses in Colorado this year. MasterCard, for instance, said that this year account holders could not use their debit cards at dispensaries. Year over year, increases in regulations and taxes continue to drive business costs up, while inflation, purchase limits, and lack of merchant processing make it more difficult for patients and consumers to access cannabis, which drives them to the illicit market. This is a quote from the MIG Executive Director, Truman Bradley. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer included safeguarding and cannabis banking on his to-do list for the fall, and is raising the likelihood that the Safe Banking Act will advance. Also, the Biden administration in late August told the Drug Enforcement Administration that it should move marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. The move, if accepted by the DEA, would not open the door to interstate sales, but would have a tangible impact in allowing pot operators to deduct business expenses like 280E. During a recent appearance on Newsmax, Representative Matt Gaetz, a Florida Republican, said that the issue, perhaps the worst decision made by the U.S. government in 1970, was to begin the war on drugs through the Controlled Substances Act. Organizations that oppose the rush towards lax marijuana laws say it's time to reflect on whether the industry is good for Americans rather than bail it out. It's very clear this experiment has failed, Mr. Nafarado said. The black market is beating the legal market everywhere. He also stated that Mr. Schumer might be championing the safe banking measure, but even if it makes it out of the Senate, the GOP-led House won't make it a priority. He also pointed to voters in Oklahoma, Arkansas, North Dakota, and South Dakota who rejected legalization matters. We've gotten to a point where it's less about the opposition coming in with their doom and gloom predictions of what the industry is going to do, Mr. Smith said. It's more about addressing the general congressional dysfunction and the end of political divisiveness that's impacting every issue in America. So you guys, this is obviously a nation of weed in crisis, and we have a lot to talk about. Everybody's got strong opinions. What do you guys think is the top issue that is really killing everyone's economy, state from state, across the U.S.?